Sacred Heart Hospital in Houston smells like antiseptic and burnt coffee at 3 in the morning. Danielle Ross moves through the ICU corridor with practiced invisibility, her scrubs a shade of blue that blends into the fluorescent walls, her badge clipped low so it doesn't catch light. 3 months. She has been here 3 months, and in 3 months, nobody has asked her name. They know her as the quiet one. The night shift nurse. The one who takes the assignments nobody else wants without complaint, without questions, without the kind of eye contact that demands recognition. Her forearms bear thin white scars that catch the light when she reaches for 4 bags, but she keeps her sleeves rolled down unless the work requires otherwise. The limp is barely noticeable anymore, muscle memory compensating for the left knee that took shrapnel in 2007 and has never quite healed the way the surgeons promised. She moves like someone learning to occupy space without disturbing it. At the nurse's station near room for 12, Danielle charts vital signs with mechanical precision. Her pen moves across the screen in short, efficient strokes. Temperature. Blood pressure. Oxygen saturation. O2 sat 97 on 2 liters. Her hands are steady. They have always been steady. Hands that held pressure on a compound femur fracture in a bombed-out schoolhouse outside San Juan Valley. Hands that applied tourniquets to 8 Marines, 3 of them at the same time, while incoming rounds punched through the walls like angry fists. Those hands have trembled exactly once in 15 years, and that was in a psychiatrist's office at Walter Reed, and she had controlled it by the 3rd sentence. In her locker, she keeps 3 things: a cracked coffee mug she stole from a forward operating base in 2009, a dying succulent that she waters at 2 in the morning when the hospital is so quiet you can hear the fluorescent lights buzzing like mechanical insects, and a photograph folded in half so no one else will see it. 8 soldiers in desert camouflage. 2 of them have been crossed out in her mind so thoroughly that sometimes she forgets their faces. The other 6 are still there. Always there. Dr. Hargrove arrives for morning rounds at 6:27 a.m., and Danielle knows this because she has been tracking him since she started, not consciously, not the way civilian awareness works, but the way a Marine tracks threats in a crowded marketplace. The way the body remembers danger before the mind acknowledges it. He wears a navy suit that costs more than her monthly rent, a watch with a face the size of a quarter that catches light like a warning signal, and the kind of smile that people mistake for warmth. He is tall. He carries his height like a weapon. His voice arrives before his body, booming down the corridor in a laugh that contains no humor, only dominance. He passes Danielle at 6:52 a.m. near the medication dispensary, and his eyes track across her for exactly 1 second, the way a security camera scans an empty room. He sees a small woman in faded scrubs. He sees someone who keeps her eyes down and her voice lower. He sees someone easy to dismiss. He does not see the way her hands never trembled during the code in room 407 last Tuesday when the patient's heart stuttered back into life. He does not see the surgical precision with which she triaged chaos during the ER overflow on Friday night, coordinating for simultaneous crises with whispered efficiency while 3 resident physicians stood paralyzed by indecision. He does not see what her hands have done. Danielle watches him move through the unit without greeting her, without acknowledging her existence with even the minimum courtesy afforded to housekeeping staff. This does not bother her. Invisibility is useful. Invisibility is a tool she sharpened over 15 years. At the shift handoff meeting in the conference room, she sits in the back row and listens while the day shift nurses report on their patients. Her voice when she speaks is barely above a whisper, a habit so ingrained that even when she tries to project, the words arrive as if traveling through water. Room for 08, stable overnight, minimal pain. Room for 12, post-op day 3, ambulating well. Room for 15, waiting on cultures. Dr. Hargrove glances in her direction with the expression of someone who has heard a door close in a distant room. He makes a note on his tablet and does not write down her name. He does not remember her name. His eyes move across the room like they are searching for someone worth looking at, and when they pass over her, they find nothing. This is fine. This is exactly right. The alternative, being seen, being remembered, being interesting is dangerous in ways that people who have never been disappeared cannot possibly understand. At 7:19 a.m., Danielle goes to her locker to retrieve her jacket before heading home. The locker is small, metal, painted an industrial gray. Inside, she has arranged exactly 3 items: the cracked coffee mug, positioned on the upper shelf, the dying succulent in a ceramic pot that she keeps watered with leftover coffee, and her jacket, still wet from last night's rain, hanging from the single hook. She reaches for the jacket, and as she does, her fingers find the seam along the lining where she has sewn something that the hospital personnel file does not know exists. A patch. Faded nearly white from sun exposure and time, maybe 3 inches square, bearing the insignia of the Naval Special Warfare Development Group. DIVGRU. The Special Forces unit that officially never existed when the operation in Helmand Province went sideways in June 2008. The operation that erased her. The records burning not metaphorically but in an actual fire in a basement office at the Pentagon, her name redacted from every official document until it was as if she had never existed at all. She touches the patch through the fabric of the lining, and it is a ritual she performs every morning before leaving, the kind of proof. Still here. Still real. Not erased yet. Her fingers rest there for 5 seconds, and her breathing slows to what instructors at Fort Bragg used to call operational cadence, the breathing pattern that you maintain under fire when everything in your nervous system is screaming to run or fight or freeze. But none of those things are allowed here. Here, she just touches the patch through the lining and remembers that she is the only person in this hospital who knows who she actually is. By 8:15 a.m., Danielle is walking through the parking lot toward her car, a 2011 Honda Civic that runs well and draws no attention, when her phone buzzes with a text from a number she does not have saved. A number she has memorized but never stored. She does not open the text. Instead, she slides the phone back into her pocket and continues walking. The rain from last night has left the pavement dark and reflective, mirroring the gray Houston sky. She has learned that some messages are better not read until she is somewhere private, somewhere that nobody can see her face change if the news is bad. But the text waits in her pocket like a threat, and as she sits in her car in the hospital parking lot, listening to the radio play a song she does not recognize, she thinks about Dr. Hargrove and the way his eyes passed over her, and she understands with the kind of clarity that comes from watching humans for 15 years that this man is not someone who has learned to be dismissive. Dismissiveness is not taught. It is the natural state of people who have never been questioned, never been held accountable, never met someone they could not see. He thinks she is invisible because invisible people cannot hurt him. Dead wrong. In the back half of the hospital, in the staff lounge that smells like a combination of microwave popcorn and regret, Dr. Hargrove sits with 3 colleagues, the hospital's director of nursing, a senior resident in emergency medicine, and a nurse practitioner who has worked ICU for 11 years. He has a coffee in his left hand and a smile on his face that never quite reaches his eyes. He leans back in his chair with the posture of someone who has spent his entire life believing that the room belongs to him. One of the nurses laughs at something he has said. Another checks her phone. The director of nursing listens with the expression of someone attending a meeting she did not volunteer for. The quiet one, Dr. Hargrove says, and he says it in a way that is not quite a question. 3 months. Thinks she's going to settle in, find her place, become part of the team. Nobody responds immediately. The room has the quality of a space where power is being redistributed without anyone explicitly saying so. I'm giving her a week, he continues, and his voice carries the tone of someone making a pronouncement rather than offering an opinion. 7 days. Maybe 8. She'll quit. They always do. The director of nursing sets her coffee down with the deliberate slowness of someone choosing her words carefully. But before she can speak, Dr. Hargrove is already standing, already pulling his tablet from his pocket with the gesture of someone concluding a meeting that only he attended. Money on it, he says, and he says it to all of them, though his eyes focus on the nurse practitioner, a woman named Martinez who has made the mistake in past meetings of disagreeing with him about patient protocol. Anyone willing to take that bet? I say she cracks by day 7. Internal collapse. Can't handle the pressure. Can't cut it. Martinez does not respond. She is looking at her hands like they contain the answer to a question she has not yet asked. The senior resident shifts in his chair, uncomfortable with the way the conversation has turned, aware that they are crossing from casual commentary into something that has the quality of a decision being made. And Danielle, 3 floors above them, is walking to her car with the patch sewn inside her jacket lining pressed close to her ribs, and she does not know yet that the war she thought she had left behind in 2008 has just quietly, casually declared itself in a staff lounge that smells like regret. She does not know that the next 7 days are going to become a countdown. She does not know that Dr. Hargrove has just made the first of several catastrophic errors, the error of believing that invisibility means weakness, that quiet means broken, that a woman who keeps her eyes down has no ability to look back. The betting pool sheet hung on the break room bulletin board for exactly 48 hours before Danielle noticed it. She wasn't looking for it. She'd learned long ago that invisibility required the discipline of not seeing things meant to hurt her. But on the 3rd morning of her 2nd week, the charge nurse, a kind woman named Patricia who always remembered to say good morning, had taken it down and crumpled it in the trash, her jaw tight with something that looked like shame. Danielle didn't ask questions. Questions required a voice, and her voice was currency she'd learned to hoard. But she'd seen the sheet. Dr. Hargrove's handwriting, thick, aggressive, the signature of a man who pressed too hard because he needed to feel his own importance. Mouse quits, 7 days. 15 names below his. Hospital staff betting on her breaking. The cafeteria had smelled like industrial cleanser and bacon grease when she'd read it upside down, her hand steady on the coffee pot, her face arranged in the blankness she'd perfected over 15 years of not showing a single thing. That was the moment before everything changed. She didn't know it yet. The cafeteria during lunch rush was a crucible of fluorescent light and human collision. Danielle moved through it like water, present but unnoticed, carrying her tray of turkey sandwich, applesauce, and chocolate milk. The tray was institutional beige plastic, already slightly warped from 1,000 cycles through the dishwasher. She'd positioned herself to eat alone, at the corner table by the window where the afternoon sun turned the formica surface into something almost bearable to look at. Dr. Hargrove sat 3 tables away, surrounded by residents and attending physicians, his voice carrying the kind of theatrical volume that men use when they want a room to know they're in it. He was telling a story about a patient he'd corrected during rounds, his hands moving through the air like he was conducting an orchestra of his own superiority. Danielle was 6 steps from his table when it happened. His foot extended, not casually, not accidentally. The angle was deliberate. The timing was calculated. Her left leg caught the chair leg he'd pulled back, and the tray's momentum became her enemy. Gravity took it from there. The chocolate milk hit first, spreading across the tile in a brown explosion that smelled like sweet synthetic cream. The sandwich followed, turkey sliding across the floor. The applesauce container shattered against her shin, sending up a spray of pale mush. 40 people stopped talking. The room didn't go silent, silence required some kind of unified intention. This was the sound of 40 conversations dying mid-sentence, the acoustic equivalent of a collective intake of breath. Dr. Hargrove didn't look up from his phone. "Clumsy," he said, his voice cutting through the ambient noise like a blade through gauze. "Maybe night shift isn't for you, Mouse." The name hit differently this time. Before it had been a joke made to her face. Now it was a diagnosis. An assessment. A prediction about her future. Danielle knelt. Her knees found the wet floor. The chocolate milk had spread in an almost perfect circle, like some kind of dark prophecy. She began collecting the pieces of tray, the soggy bread, the fragments of the applesauce container. Her hands moved with the precise efficiency of someone who'd done worse, who'd kneeled in desert sand and held pressure on wounds that wouldn't stop bleeding, who'd sorted remains that used to be men she'd known. Pain was information. Humiliation was just a different kind of data. One breath. The kind that came from deep in her diaphragm, from the place below her sternum where her body kept its secrets. One tear. Just one. She felt it form at the corner of her eye, warm and traitorous, and she let it fall. Not because she was broken. because a woman who never cried would seem more suspicious than a woman who cried once. Composure was a performance, and she was giving the audience what they expected. The tear tracked down her cheek and she wiped it away without breaking eye contact with him, her hand moving slow enough that he could see it, the message clear: "I'm hurt, but I'm not leaving. I've cleaned up worse messes than this, doctor." Her voice was quiet, the texture of it like someone running a hand across fine grit sandpaper. Usually they apologize after. She stood. The tray pieces went into the trash. She grabbed paper towels from the dispenser and cleaned the floor, her movements mechanical and complete. When she was finished, the evidence of what had happened existed only in the wetness on her scrubs and the way the room's air had changed, thickened somehow, like humidity before a storm. Dr. Hargrove was staring at his phone. But his jaw had tightened. A muscle worked beneath his left ear. The charge nurse didn't say anything, but her eyes tracked Danielle all the way back to the break room. That look, it was the beginning of something. Patricia had seen the performance and understood it for what it was. Not weakness. Restraint. There was a difference, and some people could smell it. 3 days later, during morning rounds, Dr. Hargrove reviewed patient charts at the ICU station. His white coat had been freshly pressed. His hands gripped his coffee cup like he was holding onto the only real thing in a room full of ghosts. Danielle approached from the left side, her patient report prepared with the kind of meticulous care that turned competence into invisibility. "Bed 7, she said. Her voice had returned to its baseline, soft enough that he had to lean forward to hear her, which meant he was engaged, which meant he was trapped in the illusion of her deference. "Post-op Marine, 36 hours from emergency surgery. Vital stable. O2 sat 97 on 2 liters. Pain controlled on current protocol. Wound inspection this morning showed no signs of infection. Dressing dry and intact." He listened for 10 seconds. That was how long it took for her to deliver information that required at least a minute to properly absorb. Then he grabbed the chart, the one she'd organized with care, the one that held everything a competent physician needed to know, and threw it. Not dropped it. Threw it. The chart is a heavy thing, cardboard and metal clip, pages held together by the kind of force it takes to organize a life. The pages exploded across the floor like a flock of startled birds. They scattered under the station, under chairs, across the tile in a pattern that seemed deliberately designed to maximize retrieval time and humiliation. "Pick that up, sweetheart." His voice was the texture of gravel in a blender. "And next time, try knowing what you're talking about before wasting my time." The charge nurse gasped. A resident's pen stopped mid-writing. A phlebotomist froze with a blood tube in her hand. Danielle didn't hesitate. She didn't flush. Her eyes didn't widen. She simply began to move, down onto one knee, reaching under the station, gathering papers with methodical precision. Each page was retrieved carefully, returned to sequence, the chart reassembled like she was performing surgery on a book. Her hands moved with the muscle memory of someone who'd done 1,000 things that didn't require thinking. One breath. The kind that came from muscle memory, from 15 years of breathing through things that would have broken normal people. One tear. This one surprised her, the body making its own decisions, this single drop finding its way down her left cheek. She wiped it with the back of her hand while still on her knee, while still gathering pages, the gesture so natural it might have looked like sweat. She stood. The chart was whole again. She handed it to him with both hands, the way you'd present something to someone sitting on a throne. "I know exactly what I'm talking about, doctor." "Do you?" His jaw tightened. The muscle under his ear worked like it was trying to send a message. His eyes met hers for exactly 1 second, and in that second something shifted. He'd been trying to break her with escalation, thinking that if he just pushed hard enough, loud enough, she would eventually crack like any normal person cracked. What he saw in that second was that she wasn't cracking. That meant she had to go. What happened next didn't just silence the room. It ended careers. But Dr. Hargrove didn't know that yet. He knew only that a woman who wouldn't break was a woman he had to destroy before she became a problem. He knew only that he had work to do, calls to make, strings to pull. The betting pool had been the warm-up. This was going to be the championship. Around the nursing station, the other staff members exchanged looks that Patricia would remember for the rest of her career. The young resident named Chen would later tell the hospital ethics committee that he'd seen something shift that morning, not in Danielle, but in the room itself, as if something long dormant had finally woken up and decided to stay awake. The Marine in bed 7, unconscious through all of it, would have no memory of the chart scattering across the floor. He wouldn't remember Dr. Hargrove's contempt or Danielle's quiet response. But his monitor kept its steady rhythm, 81 beats per minute, oxygen saturation 97%, blood pressure climbing slowly back toward normal, and that small digital pulse would become the only thing in Sacred Heart that mattered, though nobody knew it yet. 3 days later, at 11:41 p.m., the elevator on the 3rd floor would ding like a bell at the start of a round. But that story hadn't begun yet. For now, there was only this, a woman wiping away tears that weren't real, gathering charts that had been deliberately scattered, and every single person watching her understand that they had fundamentally misunderstood what they were looking at. Patricia touched her shoulder as Danielle passed her at the station. No words. Just a small gesture, a squeeze that said, "I see you. I know what you're doing." Danielle nodded once and returned to her patients. The invisible nurse. The quiet one. The woman nobody remembered was in the room. Not yet. But she would be. The ICU doors exploded open at 11:56 p.m. A man, 250 pounds of muscle and rage wrapped in a stained jacket, burst through the entrance screaming. His right hand held a pistol, a dull black Glock that looked heavy and purposeful. His left hand was clenched into a fist. His face was mapped with the geography of addiction, sunken cheeks, pupils dilated like black moons, jaw clenching and unclenching with the rhythm of chemical desperation. "Opioids," he screamed. "Now! Give me the opioids or I start putting holes in people." The ICU froze for exactly 1 second. Then motion exploded in 17 different directions. Nurses scattered like startled birds. The respiratory therapist backing toward the stairwell. An intern diving behind the crash cart. A resident pressing herself flat against the wall, phone already in her shaking hand, finger hovering over 911. The monitor alarms continued their mechanical screaming, indifferent to human fear. Everyone ran. Danielle didn't. She was standing at the medication station, hands visible, feet shoulder-width apart, when the gunman's eyes locked onto hers. The fluorescent lights hummed their electric lament above them. Somewhere in bed 3, a ventilator wheezed its mechanical rhythm. The gunman's chest heaved in and out, breathing like an animal that had been cornered and was deciding whether to fight or flee. Danielle took 1 step forward. "My name is Danielle," she said. Her voice was completely flat. Not calm. Not soothing. Not the practiced tones of a hospital crisis negotiator. This was something older. This was the voice of someone who had talked terrified men off ledges while artillery hammered the mountains around Sanjin Valley. This was the voice of a senior chief who had held the hand of a 21-year-old with both legs gone and told him he was going to live. "What's your name?" "Shut up." The gun swung toward her. "Where are they? Where do you keep the good stuff?" "The locked cabinet. 2nd floor pharmacy." Danielle kept her hands where he could see them. "We can get you there. But I need to understand what you're in pain from. That helps me help you better." The man's jaw clenched. He didn't answer. Behind him, Danielle could see Dr. Hargrove pressed behind the nurse's station, his face bloodless, watching everything. "I've been where you are," Danielle continued. Same flat voice. Same measured cadence. "Hurting so bad you think the hurt is going to kill you. So bad you'll do anything to make it stop. That right?" The gunman's breathing slowed by a fraction of a degree. The barrel of the Glock lowered, pointing somewhere between the ground and her midsection. A threat but not an immediate trigger pull. "My back," he whispered. "Car accident. 2 years ago. Surgeries. Physical therapy. Nothing helps. Nothing works. 2 surgeries? Danielle asked. 3. The last one was supposed to be the one that fixed it. Doctor said it would fix it. Danielle nodded. In bed 7, the heart monitor began to beat faster. Faster. The oxygen saturation number in the corner of the monitor started to drop. 95, 93. 91. Lance Corporal Jake Mendoza's chest began to move in a strange way, his left side caving inward while his right side expanded, as if his body had forgotten how to breathe in unison. His trachea was visible now, a slight deviation to the right. Tension pneumothorax. Air trapped in the pleural space, compressing his lung, crushing his heart's ability to pump. He had minutes. Maybe less. Pain is information, Danielle said, still looking at the gunman. Not weakness. Just information. The gunman's arm dropped further. The gun was now pointing at the floor. That was when Danielle moved. The motion was economical. No wasted space. No drama. She sidestep glided toward the crash cart 3 feet away, her hand still visible, her eyes still locked on his, her voice still that same flat, hypnotic rhythm. Let me turn off that alarm, okay? It's just noise. It's making everything worse. The gunman watched her. Didn't object. Danielle's right hand reached the crash cart drawer. Her fingers found the 14-gauge catheter, the needle gleaming steel bright, exactly 2.16 inches long, designed for vascular access but perfectly suited for what she was about to do. She palmed it, sleeve covering the motion, and turned toward bed 7. Her left hand pressed gently against the gunman's shoulder as she passed. You're safe here, she said. You're not alone anymore. She reached Mendoza's bedside in 4 steps. The young Marine's face was gray. His oxygen saturation was 68 now. His right lung was already collapsing under the pressure of trapped air. His heart was being compressed by the pneumothorax cavity expanding inside his chest cavity. Another 90 seconds and he would code. Danielle's hands moved on their own. The needle was inserted at the second intercostal space, mid-clavicular line, the exact point where air accumulates in a pneumothorax. The catheter slid through skin and muscle and pleura. There was a subtle resistance, like a pen pushing through fabric, and then the hiss of air escaping. The sound of a tire going flat. The sound of breath returning to where it belonged. The catheter stayed. The needle withdrew. Danielle's eyes never left the gunman's. Her voice never wavered. There. Better now. See? You helped save his life. That's what strong people do, they help, not hurt. On the monitor, Mendoza's oxygen saturation began to climb. 70, 75. 82, 88. The cave-in of his chest began to reverse. His trachea drifted back to center. Sinus rhythm on the cardiac monitor. The noise of the bedside alarms quieted as his vitals stabilized. 90 seconds. Start to finish. The gunman's face changed. Something in his expression shifted from rage to confusion to something that might have been shame. The Glock dropped to his side, barrel pointing at the floor. That was when security burst through the stairwell door, 2 officers, 1 overhead tackle, 1 leg sweep. The man hit the tile floor hard enough that the air left his lungs in a grunt. The Glock skittered across the linoleum like a spent shell casing, coming to rest against the baseboard. It was over. The ICU erupted into motion again. A resident moved to check Mendoza's catheter placement. The intern emerged from behind the crash cart, phone still pressed to their ear, telling dispatch that the gunman was in custody. A nurse was already calling Houston PD with status. The chaos resolved into the organized choreography of post-crisis medicine. Danielle walked to the medication station and washed her hands. The water was warm. The soap smelled like copper and antiseptic. She moved with the terrifying fluid precision of someone who had done this before, not the hand-washing part, but the compartmentalization. The ability to set aside what had just happened and move to the next thing that needed doing. The psychological equivalent of muscle memory. But Dr. Hargrove was no longer behind the nurse's station. He was on his phone in the hallway. She could see him through the glass partition, his face flushed, his voice low and urgent. He was already calculating. Already planning. She had just performed a procedure without physician oversight. No doctor had authorized the needle decompression. No standing order existed for her to perform emergency decompression. It was a violation of protocol. It was unauthorized. It was exactly what he needed. By 12:04 a.m., he had called Dr. Chen, the chief medical officer, and reported a serious safety violation. By 1:15 a.m., he had contacted the Texas Nursing Board with a preliminary complaint about unsupervised procedure performance. By 2:02 a.m., security was at her locker, holding a termination letter dated 11:08 p.m., effective immediately, for unauthorized medical procedures performed without physician oversight, violation of institutional protocols, safety endangerment. They gave her 20 minutes to clear her things. Danielle placed her badge on the desk. The cracked coffee mug she'd brought from home went into the cardboard box. The dying succulent. A pair of backup scrubs. At the very bottom, in the inside pocket of her jacket, was the object she never removed, the faded unit patch sewn into the lining, the only physical proof that she had ever served. The patch was from the 75th Ranger Regiment, colors faded to ghosts, stitched into fabric that had been with her through 3 continents and 2 wars. She didn't remove it. The security guard, a man named Torres who had always been respectful, walked her to the exit. The hospital was quiet at 2:27 a.m. The night shift was in its deepest hours. Fluorescent lights cast everything in shades of gray. The parking lot was almost empty. It started to rain. Not a drizzle. A downpour. The kind of rain that falls when the sky has made a decision to empty itself completely. Danielle stood at the bus stop, soaked through her scrubs, cardboard box getting soft in her hands, and waited for the 3:15 to downtown. Inside the box was her entire life at Sacred Heart Hospital. 3 months of invisibility. 3 months of taking every insult without response. 3 months of watching a man steal from his own institution while she watched. 3 months of being the quiet nurse nobody noticed. Nobody had noticed. But someone would. Eventually. Within hours of the gunman collapsing onto the ICU floor with security's weight pinning his shoulders, Dr. Hargrove was already in his office dialing. His fingers trembled, not from shock, but from rage. The mouse had crossed a line. She performed a procedure. Without his explicit authorization. Without his signature on the chart. He'd watched her do it, watched her hands move with that terrifying fluid precision, watched her save the Marine's life in 90 seconds flat, and all he could think was, she just gave me everything I need. He punched Robert Chen's personal number. The hospital board chairman answered on the second ring, voice heavy with sleep. It was 2:13 a.m. Robert. We have a critical situation. A nurse on my unit performed an unauthorized invasive procedure without physician oversight. Needle decompression. On a patient in active crisis. I need this escalated immediately. Hargrove's voice was steady now, controlled, the voice of a man protecting institutional integrity. Her name is Danielle Ross. Night shift. 3 months tenure. I've been documenting behavioral red flags since she arrived. This is the incident that proves my concerns were justified. Chen was awake now. Did the patient survive? That's irrelevant. Protocol is protocol. She placed her hands on a patient without a physician's direct order. That's grounds for immediate suspension pending investigation. Hargrove let the silence hang. He could hear Chen calculating, weighing liability. I'm calling the Texas Nursing Board now. I'll need your support with HR. The board chairman exhaled. Do it. Protect the hospital. Hargrove hung up and made his second call. The Texas Nursing Board night coordinator took notes as he constructed his narrative with surgical precision. Unauthorized procedures. Performing invasive interventions without explicit physician oversight. The nurse in question has shown patterns of insubordination, refusal to follow chain of command. Tonight she inserted a needle into a patient's chest cavity without my authorization. Yes, I understand the patient outcome was favorable. That's not the point. The point is breach of protocol. The point is patient safety standards. The point is that if we allow nurses to decide when and where procedures get performed, we've surrendered medicine to chaos. The board coordinator, a woman named Patterson, voice like gravel in a bucket, said she would flag the report for emergency review. Hargrove hung up, feeling the weight lift from his chest like pressure releasing from a sealed vessel. Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. He'd turned her heroism into evidence against her. By dawn, the hospital's HR department had received calls from both the board and the nursing board. By 0800 hours, Danielle was called into a closed-door meeting on the administrative floor. The HR director, Margaret Willis, sat across from her with a folder already prepared. Your employment is being terminated effective immediately, pending investigation by the Texas Nursing Board. You performed a needle decompression on a patient without explicit physician authorization. Dr. Hargrove has documented this as a serious breach of protocol. Danielle sat very still. Her hands were folded in her lap. The patient's lung had collapsed. His O2 sat was 68%. He would have arrested in minutes. I understand the outcome appears favorable. That doesn't change the fundamental violation. You overstepped your scope of practice. You made a clinical decision that belongs to the physician on duty. Margaret slid a termination letter across the desk. Security will escort you to your locker. You'll surrender your badge and access card. You are not to return to this facility. The words fell like rocks into still water. Danielle had known this was coming. She'd felt the shape of it when she decided to act, when muscle memory and 18 years of training overrode the 3 months of invisibility she'd constructed. You don't violate a federal erasure order and walk away clean. You don't perform combat medicine in a civilian hospital and expect no consequences. She'd known. And she'd done it anyway because the Marine in bed 7 would have died in 90 seconds, and some orders supersede other orders. She stood. I understand. Security arrived 12 minutes later, 2 officers she'd never seen before, their badges glinting under fluorescent lights that hummed like insects. They walked her to the nursing lockers in the basement. Her shift bag was still there, uniform folded inside, her sneakers on the bottom shelf. She opened the locker and began removing the small artifacts of 3 months of careful invisibility. The cracked coffee mug that said "A World's Okayest Nurse," a gift from a night shift tech who'd tried to befriend her. The dying succulent with 3 brown leaves that someone had left in the break room and she'd adopted, thinking maybe it would survive under her care. And the photograph in the plastic sleeve, tucked behind her spare scrubs where no one would see it. 8 men in desert camouflage, October 2008, Helmand Province. Their faces burned dark by sun and by what they'd seen. Senior Chief Petty Officer Danielle Ross, age 27, standing third from the left, arms slung across the shoulders of her team corpsman, Marcus Chen. Half of them were dead now. Marcus. Lieutenant David Sorensen. Petty Officer 2nd Class Ryan Holloway. Hospital Corpsman 2nd Class James Gator Garrett. All of them ghosts. All of them officially erased from the record, their deaths classified, their service buried, their names forbidden. She placed the photograph, the mug, and the succulent into the cardboard box that had been brought for her belongings. Security stood 6 feet away, watching but not speaking. Her jacket hung on the locker's hook, the green field jacket from 2008, never washed, the faded Special Forces unit patch stitched inside the lining where only she would ever see it. She slipped it on. The weight of it was like muscle memory made textile. That's everything, one of the officers said. The rain had started by the time they escorted her out through the employee entrance. Not a gentle rain, a Houston downpour, the kind that fell like someone had tipped a bucket upside down in the sky. Water hammered the asphalt, steam rising where it hit the heated concrete. The officers didn't walk her all the way to the parking lot. Just handed her the box, watched her go, then disappeared back inside where it was warm and dry. She stood at the corner of Fannin and Elder, rain soaking through the green jacket, the cardboard box beginning to soften at its edges. A bus stop bench was for blocks south. She walked there because she had no car, no apartment lease, no address except the one on the termination paperwork that was already becoming fiction. The bench was metal, bolted to concrete, the shelter's plexiglass so fogged with rain and age that she could barely see through it. Sodium lights reflected in puddles, orange and sickly yellow, the color of old bruises. She set the box down carefully and sat beside it. Rain ran down her face, but she wasn't crying. Crying would have been a luxury. Crying would have meant she still believed in things. She touched the photograph through the cardboard, tracing the outline of Marcus Chen's face even though she couldn't see it through the wet box. Her lung was still tight from the knife wound sustained in 2007, tissue damage that had never fully resolved, scar tissue that made breathing difficult in cold rain. She breathed through it. Pain was information. Pain was data. Pain was just another input to catalog and file and move past. The rain intensified. 3 a.m. became 3:27 a.m. became 4:22 a.m., and she sat there in her ruined jacket with her cardboard box, officially unemployed, officially under investigation, officially a threat to institutional order. Inside Sacred Heart Hospital, Dr. Hargrove was probably sleeping soundly now, his fraud scheme insulated another day longer, his victory tasted like bourbon on the back of his tongue. Nobody would look too closely at billing records now. Nobody would audit his insurance claims. The mouse had been neutralized. The risk had been contained. She reached inside the jacket, felt the unit patch with her fingertips. The embroidery was so faded now you could barely read the designation. But she knew what it said. She'd always know. Senior Chief Petty Officer Danielle Ross. Special Forces. Helmand Province. 3 tours. 16 lives saved in that particular operation. 8 lives lost over her career. The one she couldn't reach in time. The one she'd held as they bled out. The ones whose names were buried deeper than any classified file. The bus came at 4:38 a.m. She didn't get on it. She sat there as sodium lights reflected in puddles, as rain hammered the shelter, as the city woke up around her. A man in a business suit hurried past, briefcase shielding his head, not even seeing her. A delivery truck splashed through a puddle and soaked the bench. She didn't move. Movement required intention. Intention required believing that any of it mattered. That any of it was real. But something had shifted in that ICU at 2:13 a.m. Something that couldn't be shifted back. Lance Corporal Jake Mendoza lay in bed 7 in that same hospital, breathing steadily now, his body mending because her hands had known exactly where to place a 14-gauge needle and exactly how much pressure to apply. He was alive. That was real. Everything else, the termination, the box, the rain, the erasure, was just the consequence of that one moment when she'd chosen to be a person instead of a ghost. 3 days would pass before anyone else in that hospital realized what they'd done. 3 days before recognition arrived in dress uniforms and gold insignia. 3 days before the truth, buried so carefully for so long, finally broke the surface. But for now, there was only the rain, and the bench, and the box containing everything she had left. 3 days. That was all it took for the truth to surface. Lance Corporal Jake Mendoza woke in bed 7 with sunlight streaming across his bandaged ribs, his lungs finally holding air without the rasp of a chest tube. The medication fog was lifting. His eyes cleared, and that's when he saw it, the employee photo posted on the ICU bulletin board, part of a staff appreciation display near the monitors. Danielle Ross, RN. The name meant nothing to the other patients, the residents, the attending physicians walking past. But Jake's eyes went wide. His hand trembled as he pressed the call button once. Twice. A nurse appeared, not her, and Jake's voice came out rough, barely a whisper, "Get my CO." Now. Tell him Phantom is here. 20 minutes later, Commander James Reeves of SEAL Team 3 stood in the ICU corridor with Jake's file open in one hand, his other hand pressed against the wall. His jaw moved like he was grinding concrete. He'd thought she was dead. 17 years, and he'd thought she was gone. He pulled out his secure phone and made 3 calls. Then 4. Then 6. Each conversation lasted under 90 seconds. By the 7th call, his hands were shaking enough that he had to grip the phone with both hands. When he spoke, his voice carried the kind of weight that made nurses straighten their spines and doctors step out of his way. I need to speak to Admiral Patricia Chen. Tell her it's Reeves. Tell her we found her. By 2:51 p.m., the hospital auditorium was packed. Not just staff, there were uniforms. Navy blues. FBI windbreakers. A 2-star admiral stood at the podium in a dress uniform that moved like polished brass in the fluorescent light. The room went dead silent. My name is Admiral Patricia Chen, Deputy Director of Naval Special Warfare Command. Her voice carried the kind of authority that didn't need volume. I'm here because Sacred Heart Hospital just terminated one of the finest soldiers I have ever known. I'm here because her file was classified at the highest levels until yesterday, and because what happened in this hospital 3 days ago proves that the penalty for her heroism is not termination. It is recognition. She placed a single photograph on the podium. A younger Danielle, scarred, lean, wearing combat fatigues with a Special Forces unit patch visible on her shoulder. This is Senior Chief Petty Officer Danielle Ross. She served 15 years with the 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta. During her final deployment to Helmand Province in 2008, she participated in a classified operation that went sideways. Her records were erased. Her name was struck from military rolls. She was officially denied, which meant she could never speak of her service, never claim her decorations, never tell anyone the truth about who she is. The Admiral's eyes moved across the room, finding Dr. Hargrove in the 3rd row. His face was already draining color. Senior Chief Ross received the Navy Cross for her actions that day. 2 Silver Stars for previous deployments. The Distinguished Service Cross for extraordinary heroism under fire. The Admiral paused. Each medal landed like a fist. She also held the hands of 16 soldiers who should have died on that mountainside but didn't. Because she knew how to save them. Now the Admiral's voice dropped lower, and somehow it filled more space. One of those 16 was Lance Corporal Jake Mendoza. He was 8 years old. She pulled him from a bombed-out school with his leg fractured in 3 places and shrapnel embedded in his abdomen. She applied a tourniquet with one hand while providing tactical radio support with the other. She kept him alive for 47 minutes until a medevac helicopter arrived. He would not be alive today if she had walked away. Jake was crying now, openly, in a hospital bed 10 feet from where his commander stood. 3 days ago, a gunman entered this ICU. Your hospital staff froze. Your physicians froze. Senior Chief Ross stepped forward, talked the gunman down, and when Lance Corporal Mendoza's condition deteriorated, she performed a needle decompression at the 2nd intercostal space, a procedure that saved his life in 90 seconds. The same way she saved him 17 years ago. The Admiral looked directly at Dr. Hargrove. You terminated her for unauthorized procedures performed without physician oversight. Let me be very clear, Senior Chief Ross has more medical training, more field experience, and more lives saved than most trauma surgeons walking these corridors. She didn't need oversight. She needed you to get out of her way. The room was breathing in perfect unison now, the way crowds do when they witness the moment the world stops rotating in one direction and starts in another. Dr. Hargrove, you are no longer permitted to work in this facility. That's when it started. The clicking of handcuffs, not on Danielle, but on him. 2 FBI agents moved from the back of the auditorium toward the 3rd row with the casual precision of people who had done this before. Dr. Hargrove stood, his face the color of drywall, his expensive Italian leather shoes scuffing against the floor as he tried to move sideways. The doors at the rear of the auditorium sealed shut. An FBI agent in a grey windbreaker stepped to the microphone. Dr. Richard Hargrove, you are being taken into custody for investigation of insurance billing fraud spanning 18 months, involving approximately $340,000 in kickbacks from medical device manufacturers. We have documentation of falsified procedure codes, fabricated patient records, and unlawful retaliation against a protected federal operative. The agent's eyes were the color of winter. Your medical license is suspended effective immediately pending full investigation. The Texas Medical Board will be notified of these charges. You have the right to remain silent. The words continued, but nobody in the auditorium was listening anymore. They were watching Dr. Hargrove's hands shake as the agent recited his rights. They were watching his carefully constructed career collapse in real time, the way a building falls when the foundation cracks, not all at once, but inevitable, unstoppable, complete. 6 months later, the reputation rebuilt itself in the way of institutions. Sacred Heart issued a formal apology. The hospital's insurance company issued a check with back pay and damages. Danielle was reinstated to the ICU night shift. The Navy offered her a position training combat medics at Coronado. She declined. She preferred the quiet of night shift. She preferred the darkness where you could save lives without anyone watching you do it. The succulent on her locker shelf was green again. Someone had been watering it while she was gone. The photograph of her 8-man team stayed in her pocket. The unit patch remained sewn inside the lining of her jacket, a secret against her ribs. One Saturday afternoon in early spring, Danielle was walking past a strip mall on Westheimer, the kind of place where time moved differently, nail salons next to tax preparation offices next to check-cashing stores. She wasn't planning to stop. She was heading to the grocery store 3 blocks south to buy coffee and eggs and the kind of rice that takes exactly 18 minutes to cook. But then she saw it. A folding table. Aluminum legs, the kind that rust in Houston humidity. A hand-painted sign hanging crooked, discount insurance, low rates, walk-ins welcome. And behind that table, wearing a wrinkled polo shirt with a logo that didn't quite fit anymore, sat Dr. Richard Hargrove. His hands were shuffling papers that nobody would ever read. His face was thinner than it had been, not from illness, but from the specific weight loss that comes from sleeping poorly and waking at 3 in the morning. His expensive watch was gone. The Rolex she'd seen him checking during morning rounds was replaced with a plastic Timex from a CVS pharmacy. Danielle didn't stop walking. She didn't acknowledge him. She simply continued past, turned into the coffee shop next door, ordered a black coffee with an extra shot of espresso, and positioned herself at the window table with a clear view of his folding table. The rain started, light at first, then steady. The kind of Houston rain that arrives without warning and has no schedule for leaving. She sipped her coffee slowly, watching through the glass. Hargrove pretended to shuffle those papers. His hands shook visibly now. Foot traffic avoided his table the way people avoid broken glass on a sidewalk, automatically, without conscious thought. A woman with a stroller walked past without looking. An old man in a suit walked past without pausing. A teenager walked past without even seeing the table existed. He sat alone under a sagging canopy. Rain pooled around the aluminum legs. Danielle stayed for 30 minutes. She didn't take photos. She didn't smile. She didn't do anything except sit and sip coffee and watch, the same way she had watched for 3 months in the corridors of Sacred Heart, invisible, taking one measured breath before responding to cruelty, never flinching. His shoulders hunched lower. His jaw clenched tighter. When customers did walk up to his table, he quoted prices so high they walked away immediately. He wasn't trying to sell insurance. He was just sitting there, breathing, surviving, experiencing the particular quiet devastation of invisibility. When she finally stood to leave, Danielle paused at the coffee shop door. She caught his eye through the rain-streaked glass. Dr. Hargrove's hand froze. His face went pale. She held his gaze for exactly 3 seconds, the same measured look she had given him when he threw patient charts at her feet, then turned and walked into the rain without speaking a word. That night, back at Sacred Heart ICU, Danielle watered the succulent on her locker shelf. She checked the vital signs in bed 7, a new patient, stable, breathing on his own. The unit patch inside her jacket lining felt smooth against her ribs, worn soft from years of being touched by hands that held secrets. Her phone buzzed during dinner break. A text from Commander Reeves: "My daughter asked if heroes are real. I showed her your picture." Danielle typed back, "Tell her yes." She deleted that, then typed, "Tell her yes." She hit send, then slipped the phone away and headed back to the ICU. The night shift was just beginning. The corridors were quiet. The monitors beat their steady rhythms. And in the spaces between those beeps, in the darkness where nobody was watching, a woman in blue scrubs kept saving lives, one quiet shift at a time. Somewhere in the rain, a man sat at a folding table, learning what it meant to be invisible. And the quietest nurse in Sacred Heart Hospital had finally stopped counting the days since her silence became her power. If you've ever been underestimated by someone who didn't know your true value, subscribe to see more stories about warriors hiding in plain sight. Like this video and comment below. Have you ever misjudged someone only to find out you were dead wrong?